welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here. Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I am Julie Tenner, and I hope Bridget Wood is joining us, but in this world of, the ether and the internet, let's hope she makes it here. So if not, though, I want you to know that we are joined today by the beautiful Jill from Born Wise. And if you caught our Facebook Live with her or you're in Soul Driven Motherhood, you'll know exactly who she is. So we have brought her onto the podcast to have just a really mum-to-mum conversation around what her journey with 3 children has been of homeschooling and the difference between homeschool and school at home, which I was largely unaware of that difference up until probably this last week. And it's brought up an enormous amount of conflict internally within me and many questions that I didn't know I actually even had. So that's why we really wanted to have this conversation really as medicine for Bridget and I. And we also know that if it's happening for us, it's likely happening for our listeners too. So Jill, just want to say hi. And then I just want to talk about our podcast sponsor. And then I'm going to chat to you. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
So our podcast is sponsored by Space Maker Wardrobes. So spacemakerwardrobes.com.au. They are a DIY flat pack design for any space that you have with mirrored doors. So if you're in our Seek More group, you can see I'm sitting in a bedroom that has now a beautiful mirrored wardrobe right behind it, and it has been phenomenal in the setup of organisation, which this is, if you ever had a time in your life where you're ready to clear the clutter and really make way for the next version of you and your family, then I absolutely believe that Space Maker Wardrobes will be able to help you, because it's a beautiful family-run company and all Australian-made. So please check them out. They do have a 10% Nourishing Mother discount code, which we will have in our show notes and also on the socials. So if you're ready to organise your space, spacemakerwardrobes.com.au. So I just have 2 other questions that I want to make sure that we get to too.
Yeah.
One is the social isolation concept of homeschool, which I know, Bridget, you had a really cool conversation on yesterday, and I want to come back to that. And the other is, which I know, Jill, you and I started before we started recording, was VCE, what that even looks like, how you even get what we call here, it used to be an NTAR, what do they call it here now, like the number that you get at the end of ATAR, that you get at the end of year 11 and 12, which then theoretically determines what university course you get into. Now, I realise that this whole structure of university is to some extent becoming obsolete, and will it even be completely obsolete by the time our children arrive? Maybe. But as it's not going to be for my eldest 2, maybe for my youngest 2, that's a possibility. But for my eldest 2, that system will still very much be predominant, I think. So do you know what VCE looks like, how you tackle it, how they even get an enter score if they're homeschooled? Like, you're still doing the same exams. I don't even know what that looks like. What does that even look like? I don't even know.
I don't know anyone who's doing it, and I've put out all of my feelers to all of the homeschoolers that no one knows anything about BCE because no one seems to homeschool in high school. They all do it in primary school, and then everyone leaves at high school. And so I'm finding this world of like, I don't even know what that looks like, you know, and the social isolation thing. So I know, Bridget, yesterday you had a really cool conversation. I can't think of her name now. What was her name?
With Melinda from Deer and Fawns?
Yes, with Melinda from Deer and Fawns. And she basically bust that in one sentence by saying, yes, that's the common thing that gets thrown up. But we're in a classroom for however many hours, 5 hours a day, and all you get told is, shh, stop talking. And I was like, holy shit, that's true. So all it is recess and lunchtime. And the fact that you do ultimately, though, for my high school kids, like my kids who are doing high school at home now, it's totally scheduled. The entire 6 hours is planned out by their teachers. So they're still doing school, but it's at home. And they're ultimately really not enjoying it because what they enjoy is the camaraderie with their friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the teachings, you know, sometimes every now and then they'll get something that they really feel lit up about, but mostly it's they miss hanging out, sitting next to, you know, the banter and the whatnot that happens with friends. So I don't know. I mean, in primary school, I get it. The system seems more set up for homeschool. There's loads of, you know, bush kinder and different activity groups and homeschooling groups. But when there's no one around in high school, yes, there's extracurriculars. Yes, we might find experts or pockets of community learning that, you know, they might connect with people on, but I don't even know what that looks like. Can you see how my head is in a whirlwind?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of, again, like just in the same boat, like the high school thing for me as well, it's different, like it's out of my comfort zone. I guess my son has lots of mates from his, you know, the local community anyway, so he's still in touch with that. Well, obviously not at the moment because we're all in isolation, but yeah, I see that as a massive thing. I think, yeah, like I feel like that for younger kids that there will be a lot more homeschooled high school kids because you just see that that's where the trend's going. Like if we've got, yeah, I think it's grown 65% homeschooling in WA in the last few years. So that'll continue, I guess. But yeah, there's a lesser population of high school homeschooled kids. Definitely in WA, we haven't met as many. But I do know of them as well, and they just go through all these different avenues depending on what their interest is. And if you want to go to high school and if you need to get, uni, and you need to get that ATAR score, like there's courses that you can do and you sit the exams and you just, well, that's our conscious approach right now. That's what we're working on. That's what we're doing. So it's just kind of applying that intentional teaching as that's what the child's goal is, in my opinion. I've spoken to a few people who have homeschooled, like 4 or 5 high school kids, and I think she said 3 of those were in uni now. The other 2 weren't. So I don't actually know the specific courses and the specific streams, but they're there as well. And it's like you have to go digging around to like find these things a little bit. So I kind of enjoy that. But we've worked on having a bit of a community here that on a Monday we have a little homeschool group where it's like babies to like 12-year-olds. I guess my son is the eldest, but he learns from some of the men that are there, like there's some of the dads. And that seems to be enough for him at the moment. But yeah, it's a long-term thing. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to kind of, maybe he will ask to go to high school and it won't because he thinks that's a better learning option, but because he wants to hang out with his mates. So I think that's, again, why we're just not making long-term decisions and going with what happens. And then what was your other question? Sorry, the socialisation.
Talking about the concept of socialisation, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with what was it?
Melinda.
With Melinda, yeah. 100%, and that's been like a huge thing for me as well because I used to think that all these social emotional skills we were teaching in the classroom, it's really just about asking people to stop talking and to listen to you. And It sounds terrible. Like, I hate even saying it, but I definitely did that in the classroom. And so a lot of the time you're shutting down the social emotional opportunities. And I also think they do learn from families. Like, that's full on for us to kind of take that on board. It's going, well, our kids are learning the social emotional skills ultimately from the ones they see modelled around them. So they watch us talk to our friends, they watch us talk to our husbands and our own parents, you know, and they learn so much from that. I think that's what we kind of, that's what I'm realising at the moment, that it's, and a lot of what they learn at school, social emotional stuff, a lot of it is a bit, I don't know if I had this thing is like there's a lot of disempowerment of other kids in these massive groups where everyone's the same age, and then, you know, bullying, I don't even really like using that word, but it comes up because I think they're not natural social environments to begin with. They're very contrived. So
the whole thing, that so much of what seems on the surface, and like I so get it, like they're trying to make the best of a system, which is really old and outdated. And I could not believe the amount of red tape and basically myopic views, and like, it was. My son did his first year. He didn't do 4-year-old kinder. He did a year of Montessori prep before that got dumped from the school. And I couldn't believe the lack of vision on every level of the education department to recognise the value of a progressive education like Montessori. And that was what I felt was quite heartbreaking, was that there's no leadership here in desiring to move to a more child-centred, child-led education philosophy, because, you know, what we have now is really very top down. It's what do we want the child to know, what do we think a child should know, and how should they learn it, and this is what we're going to push down.
Totally.
And I mean, he still constantly talks about that old school and how much better that was, and, you know, he's had a taste of a much more empowered learning experience, where you can choose when you eat, and when you don't get told that you have to stop something that you're loving, and you don't get forced to share, and, you know, all of these things that happen in a traditional school environment. And so I do think if we're waiting for grand leadership, it's a very, very slow moving beast, even in the face of recommendations towards every child being on individual learning plans, not just not just the kids with additional needs or the at-risk children. It's, you know, every child, amazingly, is unique, and it all has a different goal that they're trying to work on.
Yeah, that's why the putting some of that power back on the kids, especially the older kids. Like my oldest son just thrives when I'm like, well, no, you help me figure out this maths curriculum and how we're going to meet it. Like, it's not totally up to me. It's also in your interest. He kind of, that seems to interest him. I mean, almost to the point where he's like, so can I figure out a way of playing my guitar and that, you know, ticking some maths? And I was like, you can figure that out. Yes, you can. But to me, that's creativity in itself. And, I mean, Julie, you did it, you talked about, I think, getting your mum to come to the window to do, like, it's those creative solutions to, like, how do I make this work, that I think are presented when they have to take a little bit of ownership instead of, being so told this is what you need to learn and you need to learn it by this age. So my role isn't as big as, like, I think people think, oh, my God, you homeschool your 3 kids. Like, how on earth do you do that? I have more time now than when I sent the older 2 to school. Like, my time is more organic. Like, it's more, I can make it a little bit more, you know, I'm not a good timekeeper. Like, the stress I used to have to get out in the morning and get them to school on time and the lunchbox is packed and doing all of that. Like, I used to have this, like, feeling in my chest, this tightness every morning, and I didn't even know it was there. And then they finished school, and that's not school's fault. That's me. But
you sound like me. I don't do well with, like, you know, firm structure like that.
No, I don't. And trying to fit into it, like, is really quite stressful for me. Like, it really stresses me out. And then, I'd be cranky at them and yelling at them by the time we were getting to the car, and just, like, a bit of a mess. And I'm not like that anymore. So in the mornings, anyway, obviously I still get like that sometimes, but
can I just ask on that, how has that transitioned from having periods of separation from your children to spending more time with your children? Have you found that to be less harmonious or more harmonious as a family environment?
So much more harmonious.
I find this so interesting because it's such the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, when the older two were little, I couldn't wait for school to start. Like, I just kept thinking, oh, my gosh, once they're both in school full time, I'll have my time back. Like, that was this, like, illusion I was selling myself on, that I'm going to get all this time back. And, like, looking back on it, it just seems crazy. But, like, I hear it now and people saying it, and I get why you're saying it.
All the time. Yeah. That's the main focus point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel more in charge of my time now. Like, I can get my stuff done in a time frame that works better for me, because there's more opportunities. We're not spending all this time in the car going places, and our relationship's better. Like, we still have, obviously there's still, like, there's 5 of us living in the house. We all still clash and everything as well over things. But I think because we're spending more time together, we kind of just know where each other's at. And in terms of schooling, I didn't really know where the boys were at, and I feel bad, like, even admitting that, because I just handed over the whole
totally. It's like outsourcing it.
Yeah. And it's like someone else is dealing with that, so I don't have to worry about that. But I was completely, like, I just didn't have any idea. And now I can kind of realise that my second son is not even ready for the stage of curriculum that he's supposed to be going through. So we've gone back a couple of years and going back and readdressing some of the things he missed. And it's like half an hour a day I can kind of get back on board with him. And then he's doing his thing for the rest of the day. And, like, screen time's become less of an issue, which I think is I was worried that he would just want to be on, like, a screen or a device all day. But for some reason that's not a thing. I don't even really know why. I don't know why. Like, he used to come in from school and want to go straight to the TV or laptop. Yeah, and he's not. So I don't know why.
So my other question is, why did you choose homeschooling over another version of a structure such as Steiner or Montessori school?
Yeah, well, I worked in those sorts of schools. Like, I worked in Reggio-inspired schools, and I think I just came to I think it was my own experience of just seeing awesome philosophies get kind of diluted, and they kind of drown in the administration and the structure, because a lot of them talk about these natural flows and the uniqueness of the child. And I felt like I was failing at that a lot of the time in the classroom, to, like, really see some children. At the end of the day, I'd think, oh my gosh, little so-and-so, what were they doing all day? Like, I just didn't connect with them. And, so for me, and I know homeschooling isn't an option for everyone. Like, it's the way I work. I work from home, so I can kind of fit that in. But for me, it was just a realization that structures, I think we completely changed the way school looks, I think, because I was in that space for a long time going, who's going to change the school system? Who's going to shake up the education department? And I used to write letters, like, literally write letters, like, I don't know, like, to all these educational leaders saying, we need to change stuff. This is not working. And then I just, it was like quitting teaching and then going, I just have to make small changes myself. I can't go into the education department and completely change it. I'm just kind of sick of hitting brick walls and being in that fight. Like, I just wanted to fight everything that was to do with any education, law and regulation. I just had this real fight.
Yeah, the fire in your belly. But I find that so interesting that you have also come from an alternative style of or paradigm of teaching, and you still find that, because that wasn't an open awareness of mine as well. So I really appreciate that too, because I totally get it. Any system is flawed. We started in the Steiner system, and I saw the same thing. I was like, but you swap one set of rules just for another set of rules, and it's, there is
still a set of rules.
Which I totally get is needed and necessary for the whole, big machine to function. I get it.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here going, oh God, do I want that?
I know. Well, it's that, the philosophies are awesome and they look different when they're translated to a home environment. I actually see them kind of thriving, the philosophies, instead of being a version of the philosophy. But also the philosophies are still so they're kind of created a long time ago in a world that doesn't exist anymore. So it's still applicable and there's still awesome ideas in it. But, I mean, how much the world's changed since I was a kid. Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask you was, did you find when you made the transition from leaving a mainstream school system to homeschooling, did you find much kickback or emotionally tension-filled conversations from in-laws, parents, friends who perhaps you were mums within the school system and now you were leaving? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's been a thing, definitely. And, you know, lesser of a thing as time's gone on because people like lose interest in it, I guess. And we've also found like plenty of other like homeschoolers, unschoolers, natural learners, whatever you want to call them, like to kind of hang out with. So you're all in the same boat. But definitely I felt like I disappointed my mum, I think, when I first said I would take Hugo out of school. I saw this thing go over it and I just thought, oh. And, yeah, it made me feel that worry, you know, and fear. And then
did she say anything to you?
She didn't say anything, but I could tell that she was thinking maybe that's not a great choice. And a lot of, I guess I'm lucky that my parents are pretty accepting of everything that we do and I have done as a child, so I've been lucky with that. But, yeah, I could see them kind of going, hang on, what are you doing to our grandchildren? Like, are you just, you know, creating some, like, belief system of yours and pushing that onto them? So I definitely had to kind of think about that. But it was the fact that he walked out of school himself, you know. And, yeah, it's a thing from other parents, I guess, who still have their kids in school. Like, they're just, you know, they'll sort of just joke around it a little bit, I guess, and say, oh, my God, I could never do that. You're completely crazy. You know, just the stuff that I probably thought maybe 7 or 8 years ago myself, where how, you know, you won't have any time to yourself and how can you teach everyone, the kid? And, you know, we have that experience of school being so full on because when we see all the stuff they have to get through with these, like, online things.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and that's more than what I'm doing with my kids, you know. Like, I'm not doing following another person's program at the moment. So I think that's harder. Like, people who are homeschooling now in this isolation situation following another school's kind of program, I don't know how people are doing it, to be honest. I think it would be really
well, I can tell you not very well.
It would be so challenging for me. Like, I just don't even think I could do it. So, yeah, I don't know, stuff's about to change in WA because I think our schools have reopened for next term. That's probably not.
Yeah, that was surprising to me.
Yeah, I was surprised.
You haven't heard anything, have you, Bridget? You haven't heard anything?
No, but I haven't been reading anything. So.
No, me neither.
No, someone just.
You've been very quiet in this education conversation, Bridget Wood.
Have I? I'm just taking it all in. I'm just letting it land.
I'm feeling like a neurotic. And you're like, yeah, space of observation. What's going on for you?
Oh, like, I don't know. I mean, there's part of me that's like, I said to my husband about a week ago, so, like, what do you think about, like, homeschooling? It's like, okay, cool, we don't have to pay the private school, high school fee because his first thing is great. Yeah. We're not paying $20,000 a year. And I do think, you know, what could I give my kids if
I know. You know? I'm thinking that too. Do you know how much money we're spending on school this year? Just school, forget all of the extracurriculars, $22,000.
Jeez, man, yeah.
What activities and experts could I put in front of my children for that amount of money? Yeah. Plus the $1,500 I spent on uniform, plus the $800 annually for all of the books and all of the stuff. Yeah. Like, that doesn't even include all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it actually just seems like a colossal joke in many ways. Like, haha, joke's on you, you know, like all of this stuff that you want to teach your kids, you could actually give them a Rolls-Royce education out of your own back pocket, you know, like, knowing how much is out there on the internet, knowing how many ways there are to tap into different groups and different ways to learn. And like, I do wonder that if in 20, 30 years, the conscious communities like what we're in will go, how did I ever even decide at that time in history to keep my kids in that archaic model of school? Like, what was I thinking? I do wonder if we'll think that. What do you reckon, Jill?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest things for me, like seeing, parenting evolve so much faster than the school system. So, like, when I was still teaching, I was still in this job waiting for waiting for someone to write in and change it all. And then each year I just seen parents who were just more and more, like, they knew more than I knew. Like, you can Pinterest lesson plans, like you can find all the stuff I was doing in the classroom. The kids are like, yeah, I did this at home with Mum. And I was like, okay.
There's nothing Pinterest can't solve.
Like, all the things are out there. Like, you can, and parents, like, so many parents, I've read so many books on child psychology, child development, and, they know all this stuff. And I was speaking to a mum yesterday, and she was talking about her decision with exactly this. And she sort of saying she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to homeschool. And then she said, oh, look, I tried to do some project-based learning. And then she just, like, went on this spiel, and her whole face changed, and she lit up, and she was doing all of this, like, researching Leonardo da Vinci with her child and looking at art, and he was building these amazing architecture things in comparison to previously telling me how hard she was spending this time trying to get him to write. And I was like, wow, she's just said she doesn't know what to do, and then she's nailing it. Like, it was such a paradox.
Like, and it's funny because, like, I think I hear you say that, and I also think about myself. And the first day of lessons for my son was all around closed syllables. And, like, I've done a journalism degree. I was an English major, right? I'm like, I don't know what a fucking closed syllable is.
Well, thank God, because I don't either. And
I was going, how can I? And then I'm like, how could I teach this? Like, I don't know what a closed syllable is. I don't know. I can't teach him what he needs to know, and that's part of, I think, the resistance that we might find. But at the same time, I can, build a scaffold around him how he could go and research this amazing thing and build a whole project out of it. And so it's not that we need to know all these things, is it? It's really about we need to know, like, what they're looking for next and how to put that in front of them and how to help them be their own guide.
It's so funny you say, because that's what the kind of why I think we're so confronted right now, because a lot of us are seeing the curriculum up close for the first time. And, I mean, my husband probably won't like me sharing this. No, he won't mind. But, like, one of the boys was doing a lesson on mammals, and Locke was in the kitchen, and he's like, well, I don't know what a mammal is. And I was like, wow, really? And he didn't. And he said, why would I need to know that? I don't have anything to do with mammals. And I was like, other than you live with them. But it kind of made a good point, because I thought, man, like, yeah, a lot of this stuff, I studied English lit as well, and I've had to, like, look in, like, the difference between different verbs and pronouns and nouns, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's in the back of my head somewhere. And then I just Googled it and said to him, oh, yeah, that's what this is. And then we went through it. So it just seemed a little bit odd, like a little bit of an odd experience.
And I guess, do we need to teach that level of mechanics of language, or do they pick up mechanics of language through immersion in reading and through copy work?
Speaking. Yeah, like, conversation.
I guess, how do we decide what's, what intricacies like that are necessary and what just simply become, by osmosis, simply by immersion into something? Like, I think of Carol Black, who said, like, it's very hard to not be literate in a literate society.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, 100%. I used to, I taught in South Korea for, a year, a long, long time ago, and a lot of the Korean high school kids would bring me their grammar exams and ask me to help with them, and they were so complex, the questions. I had no idea. I couldn't answer them. And they would say, how don't you know this? And I said, well, I know this as a language. Like, I can deliver it in my speech. I have no idea how to write that on a piece of paper, or why this rule is there in my language. It's just there. Like, and it sounds so silly when you say that. The Koreans would be saying, but why do you do that with the language? Why do you, add, plurals and all of that? And I don't know why. We just do it, which makes it sound odd. And I guess for some kids, that's where they're sitting in the classroom going, okay, we take away E when we add ing, and they're thinking, why? Like, it seems so abstract for them sitting there maybe thinking, well, what are we learning this for?
That's that whole thing. Like, until you can see a meaning for why you're learning something, it's very hard to stay engaged in that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I guess I think Elon Musk talked about unschooling in a sense, like, you start with a car and you take it apart so that you learn all the things that are there and why they're there. You don't start with it piece by piece, because you've got zero context or reason for knowing what this piece is and why do you want it, because it's just this thing in space. Whereas you start with, what you're looking for and what the goal is, and then you have meaning in it. Whereas I think most of our education model is more about, building these foundations that teachers might understand and parents might understand are meaningful, but a young child's going, what the fuck is like a common syllable and why do I care about it?
Yeah, that's such a good analogy. I haven't heard that, but that's an awesome analogy.
I think he has all of his kids unschooled by someone.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah,
because I've read so much of his stuff that I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, that's cool.
A lot of
sorry, Jill, you go and then I'll go.
No, I'll just say quickly, we did a future education conference a few years ago, and I thought the most kind of out there progressive ideas were coming through the business community. So they had business people on the panel, and also university people, high school teachers, and the business people. They were just like, this is what we need. This is what the future needs. These are the skills we need, and they were way more progressive, and a lot of them were unschooling.
Well, and I was at a conference years ago when I was in corporate. It's a big financial services group. One of our key activities was to pretend we were kindergartners, right? And do a kindergarten activity to realize how much we had lost our creativity and to find the confidence again. I thought, well, fuck, okay, how do we go back there and what's all the reasons why we're here? Because I think that's essentially what the business community is recognizing, and they will push the change in education because they'll see that they're not getting the people, the graduates with
the skill set.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw out there a contentious voice that I can hear in my head, and I don't know if it's mine or if it's a perception I perceive around judgment or a block to homeschooling, which for me is, yeah, but you have to make your kid do the thing they don't want to do, or they're going to just cruise through life assuming they don't ever have to do any hard work, or they don't ever have to do the thing they don't want to do. So then you end up with this horrid...
entitled.
Yeah. Like, I even kind of had that conversation with my daughter's teacher when I was having the point with her, and she's like, yeah, but you still have to, she still has to write. And I'm like, yeah, I fucking know. But there's still this, I don't know. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a fear in me that was like, whoa, okay, what adult does this churn out at the other end? Is it someone who's entitled, who, I don't know. Like, I just wanted to open it up to the forum of you two, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. That's been a worry for me as well. I have this real idea in my head. I want the boys to know that difficult things are worth doing as well, and it's not like this unschooling, homeschooling is not just, I'm only going to do the things I love. I want them to know the value in, facing challenges as well. So I've been thinking a lot about that and thinking about some of the teachers I've had, one of my strongest mentors, she got me to do stuff that I didn't want to do. That's where I learned oral storytelling, and I did not want to tell a story orally. I felt, no, I'll just read a book because that's easier. And she was like, no, you need to do it this way, and kind of made me accountable to myself. And I learned so much and discovered something that I really loved. So I come back to that example in my head a lot with the boys. And again, it's about observing. It's also painfully a lot about the modelling. And I've realised, this whole thing of the kids are our mirrors and all of this sort of stuff. If I get up in the morning and I'm really kind of a little bit lazy and not really very proactive. Like, I just see that completely mirrored back to me in my kids. But when I kind of show up and I try to keep that conversation open with them and say, look, I still need to do things that are challenging to me. Like, I'm not done. Like, there is all of these challenges every day. And I just try to be very intentionally open with them about it so they can see that. But then also, for me, recognizing how life brings them these lessons. Like, it really does. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I'm going to use the skateboarding example again because that's what I'm seeing. They fall off that skateboard so many times and they've got cuts, but they want to nail a certain trick. And at the moment, Tony Hawk's been an awesome online teacher to them. Like, so they watch Tony Hawk videos, and I've ended up watching them as well. And he tries a trick like 500 times, and he's like 50 still, and he just keeps going and going until you're like, stop going because you're going to hurt yourself. And I see that kind of that inspiration taken into them, and they think this guy's awesome and they want to emulate that. So I also wonder that sometimes in the classroom there's a difference between being challenged in a positive way and then being challenged in a way that it's not working. Challenge. Does that make sense?
I understand that, but I do want you to tease that out a little bit. So how do you know that with your child? How do you know when you're doing the work and you're sitting in front of them, like, it's too bad, you actually have to do this thing, versus that's cool, you don't want to do it, don't do it. Like, how do you even know that in education?
Yeah, that, like, I guess, again, I'm always using those ideas of the observation, reflecting, and feeling into it again. So, like, using these intuitive skills we have as mums, and kind of go, when does he actually need a break and he needs me to kind of like give him some time, and when actually he just needs a little bit more of a inspiration, motivation, push, whatever you want to call it. And I'm getting to the point where I can feel it in them. And I notice, especially with my middle son, that he appreciates it. But we have to go through a little bit of pain, like a little bit of discomfort and a little bit of, it's uncomfortable. And then I've realised that then he comes out the other side and he'll get on board with something. I know that sounds a little bit vague. It's kind of been a bit of trial and error and getting to know our relationship and our connection and what he responds to and what he really doesn't respond to. And the only way that's been – so that's what I would have applied with children in the classroom as well. I would have watched them, observed them. What does that child need me to do to help him or her rise to the challenge? And there was always a different technique. There was never a one-size-fits-all. Some of them needed to feel connected to me. Some of them needed to go away and do it in their own space without anyone watching. That's what I would have done. Like, if I want to learn something, I don't want everyone watching me. I want to do it in my own space. So it's a lot about relationships, I think, with that, and just going, well, what does this child need from me right now?
That's really true, actually. I love that you said that, because that is literally the exact conversation I have with my daughter's teachers in her independent learning plan, is literally, well, what do we need to do to help Lola rise to this challenge?
Yeah. So it's the same at home, like the same for you, going, okay, what does work with her? Like, and I can, all three of my boys need something different. And sometimes it's less attention, which is ironic. Like, I've learned kind of the hard way that with my middle son, that if I just give him too much attention, I'm trying to be too helpful, in a nice way, like trying to be too encouraging, almost just like destroys everything. Because I think he senses in me I'm doing it from a needy place instead of an organic place. Yeah, and they're so intuitive kids, they pick up on our feelings about stuff, and as soon as it's I'm actually encouraging him because I want to manipulate him into doing something so I feel better about it, it doesn't work. Yeah, I've often found if he's sitting at the table and I'm cooking dinner and I just casually say, hey, do you want to try that blah, blah, blah again? And he'll do it. So him in particular, my oldest son's a little bit more, just, hey, let's keep going with this because I think we need to keep going with it. He'll respond to that. but not Hugo. So it's been creative. It's the same as your mum at the window. It's been creative with what does this child need, and then getting them to know what they need. So, you know, do I actually need to go, if you know yourself, like that's like some of the self-care we talk about for mothers and everything, if the children can learn at a young age, what do I need to do to get a little bit more motivated right now? Do I need to go for a run? Do I need to be by myself? Do I need to talk to someone? Do I need to put on some music? They develop their own strategies, and that for me is that's my main aim, is so they can do it themselves, so that I'm, you know, not so kind of, I'm not taking all the reins, if that makes sense.
What do you think, Bridget?
I'm taking it in terms of as you were saying there, Jill, the idea, Julie and I talk about this in terms of parenting as a process of handing over to independence to our child. This is an extension of that in terms of handing over the independence to them and the trust that they can direct their own learning. And that feels really big as a responsibility, but this just feels like a process of remembering, right? Like school's only been around for 200 years. So we have a memory, we have like an echo in our own DNA, in our own soul, right? That we know how to teach our children, or that they know how to respond to their own callings. And this whole conversation is like a reminder of yes, like beyond the dominant influence or, you know, I guess mirage of society that we have right now, that there is actually everything we need at our fingertips to do this with our children. Without all of that, it's just the courage to take the leap and the trust to continue to show up, you know, to that commitment, right? Like, I mean, because I was reading, I don't know if you've read Brave Learner by Julie Bogart, but she talks about even in your homeschool, you know, there'll be sickness and there'll be house moves and there might be a month where nothing really gets done. And I'm like, oh, what? Like a month of no learning? But I guess that's when we're looking at learning from that very narrow prism of school-based learning, which is, you know, so heavily literacy and numeracy focused. But then when we take the context of learning much wider, of course they're learning things it's just we don't think so because we're so schooled on what measurement has to look like for that learning, whereas it's much more broad than that.
And what do you think, Bridget, about school refusal or learning refusal or task refusal and entitlement? Like, what's your, because Hugo is probably more that than what my kids are. So you would hit that more. Where are you sitting with that?
Yeah. So I actually noticed for him, it's actually a manifestation of anxiety that comes out in aggression.
Oh,
so I actually think
that's
he's quite
so interesting.
Yeah, but that his immediate like response to the anxiety goes to aggression or goes to that you know, kind of like shut down as a way to self-protect. So for me, and this is what I'm talking about with my mother, who feels enormously challenged by that because she extrapolates out that kind of like behavior in a 7-year-old as like, you know, the 14-year-old shit kid at high school. Like that's because that's a high school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like we can't get stuck at this. This is just the surface, like what's beneath that. And so I do feel like the more that we are, you know, using the home as society, right? Like, I think if you're homeschooling your child, you're also expecting them to be a responsible, independent, whole person who knows how to fold clothes and who knows how to put them away and knows how to help prepare the table, knows how to have to feel the frustration of stopping what they want to do to help someone else. And so I think that built into the fabric of the home is pretty effective at busting entitlement and busting, you know, the world revolves around me kind of thinking, which I'm pretty onto. Like I get pretty frustrated with any kind of like, you know, enormous self-absorption. And so I think that as long as we're not like kind of, this is like such an old word, but like, you know, pussyfooting around our children so that they're not unhappy.
Yes.
I think that they naturally continue to show up and become whole and stay whole, as opposed to avoid, challenge, or become entitled, I suppose, as a strategy. Because I mean, entitlement is also, kids learn strategies from how to they learn very quickly how to manipulate parents and how to get what they want and how to avoid the thing. And so I think if we have our eyes wide open to that,
actually, can I tell you a story that, as you were saying, that just dropped in for me when I'm thinking out, why do I just attach entitlement to the home, like what I do or don't do as a parent? And as homeschooling is going to create an entitled or not, child. We were out doing a bike ride yesterday. So as you know, if you're in ISO, that the areas now of outdoor, movement parks and things are now really busy, like busy in a way they've never been before, because everybody's out of the house to exercise. It's one of the only 4 reasons you can leave your home, right? So we're out exercising as a family doing a bike ride. And so as we're, choosing our lanes and we're social distancing, I walk past the same people a few times as we're lapping around. We have wetlands here. And at one point I'd stopped to help Lola with her bike, and this other 2 women had walked past, and one of them stopped and went, I just realised who you are. No, I'm not going to say names, but I knew this woman from when I was president of kindergarten. So she was a head of education. So she's a head of education with all of the trappings that comes with, the head of what gets filtered down into all of the preschool education. Her and I had many run-ins when I was president of Kinder for 2 years. And here we are, mums together of year 8 boys in the same school.
Wow. How interesting.
Hello, universe. So she stops me to say, I just, clicked who you are. And I was like, oh my God, hi, how you going? Blah, blah, blah. I said, how's school at home in high school going with you? Because she has 3 boys. And she went, oh, well, it's, a bit of a shit show. And, I took a few days off to check if he was okay. And, I got the impression previously from conversations that it was tricky, the social emotional development with her boys, which I'm always fascinated in, as you would be too, Bridget, because what is happening in that family dynamic for that to be, for that to flourish, I suppose. So she tells me, and her son's the same age as my son. And she goes, well, I could hear him on a class with one of his teachers, and I could hear his teacher, 2 or 3 times tell him to stop doing the thing he was doing or to, interrupting the class. So she said, I popped my head in and I, just kind of gave him one of these eyes, raised brows, and he turned around and flipped the bird at me. So at that time I went, oh, well, and walked off. And I was like,
oh my God.
Like, I was literally, I think I must have just been stunned, because I'm literally like, I'm sure my eyes would have been darting everywhere as I'm like pulling all of this and going, head of education, all of the childhood development, head of what happens in our preschool. And that's cool. My son can tell me to fuck off. And I just thought, what is that? I turned around, like she walked off, and I turned to her and I went, what the fuck? Well, I don't understand this conversation I've just had. And so I've just had this moment with you, Bridget, going, why have I just attached entitlement to when I say yes to my children? Like I've just done that in my head. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist in all other versions of society and of education, right?
Yeah, totally. Definitely. That's amazing.
Yeah. Come on, Bridget, doesn't that blow your mind?
Oh my God. I think I'm just sitting here in stunned silence. Although, like, I get it, right? Like, because you can be so up here in the head and the big vision and stuff, but there's heaps of groundwork that has to happen at home socially and emotionally to not make that kind of stuff okay, right?
Yeah. And it can be hard work, can't it? Like, as well, you intellectually know the philosophy and all of that, but then your kids are going to make you, hang on, you actually have to do this as well. Like, you have to actually show up and physically do it and model it and all of that stuff. That's confronting. Like, it's massively confronting.
Yeah, but it just actually made me just think then, maybe I needed to see that yesterday, because that's the perfect thing to bust the beliefs that I've just brought here to you guys, right? Like, that's the perfect memory to awaken in that moment.
Yeah.
So I know we've been going for a really long time, Jill, and I'm conscious of how much of your precious time we are using up as well. But we really invited you on because we were so open-heartedly inspired by the lesson that you ran in Suburban Motherhood, and we're both joining your class. So I would love for you to tell us about what it is that you do with children and how that looks, and your motivations for that, and, you know, however you would like to.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I always take my own intentions and inspiration. So what am I interested in learning about, like, right now? So that's an aspect that I first think of when I want to plan a session for the kids. And then, but then being open in the moment to how do they want to take that and change it. So it's really about seeing the kids as co-creators on that journey, because I've learned that children have awesome ideas, and that sometimes we just need to, like, it's just about providing a spark of inspiration. Like, I think that's my main idea and intentions for when I do any work with kids now. It's just like, well, I want to explore this with them. Like, so as simple as the leaf that we did the other day. It's like, I'm interested in leaves because I'm seeing them. I use nature for, like, inspiration. The leaves are falling, not from all the trees. I'm just going to show up with that leaf and see where it takes us. And obviously I have ideas that I want to explore, like a story or a bit of art, but I try to be as prescribed, if that makes sense, as possible. So I know that sometimes if we do an amazing artwork as the adult and then we show it to the child does nothing because they're like, oh, I can't do that. So I try to just, like, as minimal amount of instruction as I need to provide to not make them feel like they have to do it the way I'm doing it, and then just really honouring the way we all show up in the space in our own way. So I think it's just, for me, it's a place to be with people and be with children and families in a co-creative space of learning. So acknowledging that, you know, you're as much of the teacher here as I am. We're learning together. We're, like, breaking down the aspects of this leaf. So I know that you know, it might sound a little incomplete, but that's kind of how I plan them. So I often will look at, like, a nature ritual and bring that to the children, and then it's like, well, let's see where this goes. And I'm just fascinated by what they bring to the table, and then they'll bring some idea, and then that's, for me, is how I use the planning for the next week. So I think in that leaf love session I did with my own Born Wise community, I voiced my own question as to why do the leaves change colours, and one of our families, like one of the 4-year-old girls, has sent me a story, an oral traditional storytelling about why the leaves change colour. So I'll research that and learn to tell it. I'll tell it in the group. So it's very, like, trying to be as collaborative as possible. So does that
sounds lovely.
Yeah, and then reflection, I think. So I just try to, like, use those, you know, we might only have half an hour together in the session, but that's just an anchor. I just hope to provide a little bit of inspiration for the learning, and then take that and do something that's completely different with it, or don't take it at all. But, sow a few seeds in for people's weeks to kind of then navigate their own projects. And it's interesting to me to see what the different families do with it. It's kind of fascinating. I'll get, you know, they'll send photos of, oh, we did this. And I think I could never in a million years have provided that as a learning lesson plan, because it wouldn't have come into my brain. So, yeah, to me it's just setting that tone of finding teachers and learning everywhere, like literally in the trees, in the weather, in each other, in our family.
It's really cool.
So great.
So we are going to wrap up, Jill. Is there anything that you would love to leave our listeners with when we're considering the tension point between homeschooling versus school at home? Is there anything that you would like to leave anybody with that feels unsaid for you?
No, I think I just try to, like, hopefully alleviate people's stress as much as possible by just reminding them that children are always learning. Humans are always learning. It's always as much as a part of our own growth and development as parents and teachers and education systems as it is about children right now. So we're in a strange situation that we don't really know what the outcomes are, and we don't really, I would just try to take each day as it comes and be experimental. That helps me when I approach it with a curious mind instead of oh my God, where is this going? just, well, I don't know where it's going. Let's see what happens. That helps me. So if it helps anyone else, And thank you for having me. I really learned a lot from you both as well. So it's really nice to chat.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a rich conversation. We've got so much out of it. So, and I hope our listeners have too, because it's just a treasure trove. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we're going to do a wrap up. To connect with you, Jill, where do we find you? How do we connect?
I've got, so Facebook and Instagram at the moment are the main areas. I am slowly working on a website. But, yeah, Facebook, Born Wise School, and Instagram as Born Wise. So I can message me there and find out about things. Yeah.
And we'll make sure we put all those links in our show notes as well. And to connect with you, Bridget?
SurbanSandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
ThePleasureNutritionist.com.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.